This gorgeous 1922 Ballot 2 was a great way to start the show. It seems the epitome of an early 20s sports two-seater. It has a 944cc inline 4 double overhead cam engine, giving it 70 brake horsepower at a top speed of 100 miles an hour, although that's probably only for the brave. Only 5 of the 50 or so that were made survive. The next car was everyone's idea of an historic racing car. It hardly needs saying it's a Bugatti, in this case a 1926 Type 37. It looks identical to a Type 35, which means I mistook it for one, but this is the 1500cc single overhead cam inline 4 meant for Voice-Rep racing. It was first owned by none other than Sir Malcolm Campbell. It seemed as if it had been used. This 1928 Alta with its low-slung chassis looks a generation newer than the Bugatti. It's the first model of a long line of sports and racing cars produced by the Surrey-based manufacturer. This prototype has its original 1074cc 4-cylinder supercharged double overhead cam engine, which was designed and built by the company founder, Geoffrey Taylor, when he was just 25. It gave a top speed of somewhere over 105 miles an hour. Just look, the engine was obviously designed by an engineer. It looks lovely. I've seen lots of photos of this 1940 Aston Martin Speed model Type C, but great though it appeared in the images, I was not overwhelmed by it in the flesh. Not sure why, but wondered if it was the comparison between the previous 3 cars that all seemed as if they'd been driven a lot, and this pristine one with its just restored look. It has a 1949cc inline single overhead cam engine which gave a top speed of a fraction under the magic ton. Everyone loves Bentleys from the times when WO was at the helm. And this 1928 4.5 litre with fabric touring coachwork shows why. It spent a considerable time in Africa before, during and post-war, and performed, or at least attempted, some epic journeys. Every Hampton Court Concours is a nirvana for Bentley enthusiasts, and this year was no different. Next to the Bentley was a significantly more modern looking 1935 Lincoln Model K Coupe, by, somewhat obviously, the Baron. It looked a little heavier than the Bentley, but then it had a 6,784cc V12 double overhead cam, delivering about 150 brake horsepower, so perhaps it didn't notice the extra weight. This gave a top speed of some 125 miles an hour. The 1939 Rolls-Royce Wraith holds a certain fascination for me. The 1939 Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith holds a certain fascination for me as it was the first car I rode in. This was after the war. The model here is sporting convertible coachwork by Thrap and Maybury and has a 4,257cc overhead valve 6-in-line. There was a GP local to me who owned a Jaguar MkIV in the late 1950s. It seems, in memory, to be identical to this 1948 drophead coupe, apart from the positioning of the steering wheel, of course. A top speed of 95 miles an hour was quite a feature just after the war. The car next to the Mark IV was not so much another Jaguar as one of the most iconic. It's the 1953 C-type as driven by Rolls and Hamilton at Le Mans, taking first place after an epic struggle against Ferrari. The C-type of Moss and Walker came second. It was the first time I'd seen the 1954 Lagonda DP115/2. It has the David Brown 4486cc V12, giving some 360 brake horsepower. The car was driven by Reg Parnell in a support race for the British Grand Prix in 1954. This and a sister car were to grace the Mina Miglia the following year, but they were scratched. Jackie Stewart would have loved that material. The only thing better than one 1954 Lagonda V12? That's right, a pair of them. This is DP115/3 with a different front end. I didn't hear either car running at Hampton Court. It was the first time the only two surviving Lagonda V12s had been seen together since the mid-50s. Ferrari and racing drama are never far apart, and this 1959 Dino 196S Spyder is no exception. It has a 2-litre V6 double overhead cam giving 195 brake horsepower. After races in America it was rebuilt, and Pedro and Ricardo Rodriguez drove it in the 1960 Targa Florio, where it was rolled twice, still managed a creditable 7th place. The Jaguar D-type was the stuff 10-year-old kids dreamed of, or at least this one did. This one was privately owned from new, one being Peter Grant, the Led Zeppelin manager. I quite like the colour, but I'll spare you the matching interior. Despite the big name on the front, this is a 1954 Cooper T33 with a 3.4 Jaguar engine. It was commissioned and raced by Peter Whitehead, an ex-Jaguar works driver, sharing it frequently with Duncan Hamilton. I wasn't impressed by the looks, but its driver history makes it remarkable. For me, This 1959 Maserati 3500 GT Vignale Spyder Prototipo, or prototype, was the star of the show. The engine gives 220 brake horsepower. As you can see, it has beautifully balanced lines, and who wouldn't want to sit in that interior? Being a prototype, it has minor differences to the production version which, although noticeable, did not detract from it. 245 Spyders were built, each a tribute to Italian car design. What can one say about Shelby Cobras? This is an independent competition 260, that's the 4.2 litre V8, sold by AC Cars in 1962. Beyond it, we have what I've always included in my must-have but probably won't list I started in my youth. To me, the Ferrari 250 GT short wheelbase is a much more complete design than the GTO. Other opinions are available. This is the 1962 Comp SEFAC Hot Rod, and it too has balanced lines. There's not an awkward view of the car. And, of course, under the bonnet, there's a Ferrari V12, in this case a 3 litre single overhead cam. It's wonderful. Brown would not be my first choice of colour for a 1962 Ferrari 250 GT short wheelbase Speciale Aerodinamica. It only just beats yellow, but I can forgive it all of that. As could its first owner, Fernando Gatto, who in 3 years clocks up at over 42,000 kilometres. I reckon I'd have liked Mr. Gatto. Replacing the 250 model was about as hard a design job as could be, but Ferrari managed it with this 1965 275 GTB 6C. It is sublime and lusted after by anyone with a soul. It is thankfully a slightly darker shade of brown as well. The first Lamborghini here is the 1965 350 GT with Superleggera body by Touring. It's seen by most, probably including Mr. Lamborghini, as in direct competition with Ferrari. Technically, it was the winner with its V12 3.5 twin-cam per block engine and independent suspension all round. Whether it vied in looks, I'll leave you to decide. This 1968 Aston Martin DBS Vantage, looking as if the colour silver was invented for it, has bodywork by Touring, but worked on by William Towns. Has my favourite cylinder arrangement, a straight 6. This time 4 litre double overhead cam, giving it a top speed of 142 miles an hour. It looked stunning.
I've got a Ballot I've had them 3 builds.
I've never been much of a fan of cooled cars, but the one displayed here from the Jack Boyd Smith collection in America was an exception. It's a 1937 812 Phaeton. It has a Lycoming V8 engine knocking out some 125 brake horsepower. The main feature of the car is that it's front-wheel drive, which gives it its low-slung look. The history of this one is rather complex, and it seems Amelia Earhart was the original owner, although unfortunately not for long. She acquired the car in 1936 but died in 1937. The flip-up headlights were a first, although flip-up is probably hype, as they had to be raised and lowered by hand cranks on the dashboard. The only thing that could improve the earlier short wheelbase Ferrari 250 GT would be one in a colour that enhances its lines. It's fresh from a nearly $1 million restoration. As I've said previously, it's stunning from any angle, and this one looked poised. I want one. Whenever coach builders and designers get a Rolls-Royce chassis to body, they must dread trying to incorporate the massive grille. It goes for the modern car as much as it does for this 1937 Rolls-Royce Phantom 3 convertible. Spectacular just doesn't cut it with this 1937 Talbot Lago OT 150 CSS New York teardrop. It has a 4-litre inline-6 delivering 170 brake horsepower, so as performance reflecting its looks. The colour scheme is absolutely perfect for the car. The curved doors add to the general appearance of a rather special car. I'd seen it in photographs, but it's even more overwhelming in the metal. One of the highlights of the show. Martini colours would grace any car, as they do on this 1974 BMW CSL. It's got a 3.2 inline-6, giving some 206 brake horsepower. The body has been lightened. It generated a fair amount of interest. I'm more than familiar with this TVR Speed 12. The engine gives around 800 to 900 brake horsepower, and it sounds all of that. I videoed the car running through London for the launch of a PlayStation game. It dominated the streets, well, I had some difficulties in a car park. The video is available on my website, see the link in the description. I am in awe of this car. Here you see the first of 3 Zagato-bodied cars, this one being the 1956 Maserati 6G/54 Zagato. It was built to race in the 1956 Mille Miglia. Its number was 311, which meant an unearthly starting time of 3:11 AM. It got as far as Ravenna, where it crashed out of the race, landing on its rather distinctive roof. If you're going to crash a car, the Mille Miglia is the best place to do it if you want to maintain credibility.
But what I think is quite interesting, I often think, Neil, you may agree, with the DB4 GT Zagato, the design language...
Continuing in the same vein, the car was returned to Zagato for mechanical work in 1956, where the uncle of the current boss, Andrea Zagato, crashed it. It underwent many modifications during its life, but here it is in 1958 form.
When I started collecting cars, I wanted, like anybody else, I wanted everything, which I couldn't have, and I decided that what I liked the best was the shape.
Hello, love.
The Zagato created specifically in the picture.
Yeah, I'm fine.
And this was my very
Sorry I didn't take your call earlier. I turned the sound.
Three have very different seat treatments, but you can see them all Zagato. They all have that commonality.
There's something in the Zagato cars that really show or represent the name.
Thank you for that.
And
This 1960 Aston Martin DB4GT Zagato has led an interesting, no less impactful life, although it continued racing up until the early 2000s. Despite being a Zagato, it does not have the distinctive double bubble roofline, but what it did gain there was a lightweight aluminium body and a tuned engine. I rather like the body design, even with the normal roof. The Alfa Romeo 1900 was the first chassis-less Alfa, but some were sent to Touring, Pininfarina, and as here to Zagato. It's one of 39 coupes and just 2 of the double bubble kind. They sported aluminium bodies with an extra 25 brake horsepower, giving a total of 115. With a curb weight of only 920 kilograms, its performance mirrored its looks.
And they did some minor modifications to the